Let's start with the Fed's decision for the third meeting in a row, the eighth and final meeting of 2025. They decided to cut the federal funds rate 25 basis points. Reminder, Brian, remind everybody that this doesn't mean all interest rates move down. What does this mean, and how'd they get to that decision?
Yeah, that is an important reminder because a lot of folks that are thinking about buying a house, sometimes hear on the news, the Fed cut rates, and they just automatically assume, oh, that means mortgage rates are going to be, lower the next day. That is not always the case. If the rates that are controlled by the Federal Reserve is a short-term rate at which banks lend money to each other, called the federal funds rate. And that's not the same thing as a long-term rate, like a 10-year Treasury rate or a 30-year fixed mortgage rates. They don't always move in the same direction. We saw last year in 2024, mortgage rates actually went up in a couple months following the Federal Reserve rate cuts of 2024.
We saw it in the last two cuts.
And this year it's happened as well. So, but the good news, if you tuned in last week, we kind of talked a little bit about some of the forecasts that are out there as far as what some of the experts in the industry think is going to happen with mortgage rate this year. And I'm usually cautious because it's very difficult to predict the future. But I do kind of like the predictions this year. They're more or less predicting that it's going to stay about the same, which seems like a safe prediction. So far we haven't seen rates did go down a bit this week. It ended the week lower than it started. But we really haven't seen any dramatic shift in mortgage rates yet. According to Mortgage News Daily, the average 30-year ended the week at 6.26 versus 6.36 at the beginning of the week. But if you look back a month ago, November 13th, it was 6.34. So we're kind of right in that range, and that 6.2 to 6.4 range is kind of where it's been hanging out for the last couple months. And some of the we'll talk a little bit about the comments from Powell, and it's also interesting to see what else is going on around the world with some other central banks. So the Federal Reserve, Powell's just one person. He's the chair, and he kind of gets the microphone, and everybody kind of thinks he's the guy making the decision. But there's actually 12 people on the board, and this was kind of a historic meeting because only 9 out of the 12 people on the board agreed with the quarter point rate cut that they did. There was one person who thought they should have done a bigger cut, and there were 2 people that thought they should have done no cut at all. I'll pause there. What are your thoughts on?
Well, it's the biggest,
that,
dissent, they call it, when you don't have a unanimous vote, which would be 12-0, obviously. It's the largest dissent since 1990, I think 90 or 91, the early 90s, that you had 3 Fed members go the other direction. Typically, this doesn't happen. You can see that, politics are certainly playing a part of this particular FOMC, that this committee. Politics have been part of the fabric throughout Powell's tenure. He's very political himself. He called inflation transitory up until 8 days after the former President Biden reappointed him. So he plays politics for his own positioning and ranking. He also, he's got the dual mandate from Congress. It's inflation, stabilizing prices, inflation down to a 2% target. It's maximizing employment. Those are the 2 things he needs to focus on. But, he tends to add a third bucket, which is his ego. And that's influenced some of the Fed decisions. It certainly created this dissent. He's and the political climate, it's not entirely his fault. It's just politics in general where we're at right now. They kind of seep into everything. The Federal Reserve is supposed to be on an island on its own. That's not the case, when the building's located in D.C. These politicians on both sides of the aisle seep into everything, every fabric of anything that is controlled or associated with government. And so, I thought this was more of the same. Jerome Powell's basically going to be a lame duck here in short order. His tenure ends in May, and you're going to have a new. You're going to have an announcement from the administration either by the end of this year or somewhere in January. I guess they're going to kind of pick their spot. They had a leader with Hassett as the kind of the leader in the clubhouse, still the leader on Polymarket. And then the markets kind of were like, I don't know about this guy. It's a Trump handpicked person. And typically in the past, you don't see a Fed chairperson be so close to the president, meaning that they're, you know, this Hassett is believed he'll just do the president's bidding, which is, he wants to drive lower rates. You had, one member of the 12 that wanted a lower rate than what they decided on. And then you had two that didn't want to cut at all. So you can kind of see, where they are in terms of their partisanship and how that's kind of impacting their decision. You had 9 members that went with kind of a safe cut, 25 basis points. Interestingly, they also released the SEP, Statement of Economic Projections. They do that quarterly. And when they do that, there's 18 members that actually get to vote on this dot plot. Only 12 make the decision on the cut. And the consensus, the median, was that there's only going to be one cut in 2026 and only one in 2027. They update these projections quarterly, and they're basically saying, hey, our feeling is right now we're done cutting. You'll get one little cut next year and one in 27, and that's it. So the federal funds rate is kind of where it's at now. There's going to be an immense amount of pressure when the new Fed chairperson gets named from the administration, from President Trump himself, to cut. But you got to get 12 votes, or obviously, a unanimous or a majority out of those 12, rather, to make that happen. But there will be a lot of pressure to cut. Right now, they're projecting we're not going to bend the knee to that pressure.